Gonzaga's final WCC schedule looks a little different than previous years, but it ends where it should, in Moraga, California.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Well, folks, the WCC schedule is out, sort of. 61% of Gonzaga's 18 games are known for the date that the game is going to take place, but 7 of the games, we don't actually know what day the game will be. We'll get more into that and what it means for Gonzaga, as well as where they're finishing their final season in the WCC. Also, the Zags have a 4-star wing set to take an official visit to Spokane, and another 4-star wing who is not going to visit after all. We'll talk about the switcheroo with those two players in the second segment, and then close out the show with a pair of mailbag questions to get you on with your Monday. All right, we'll start here with the WCC schedule. Of course, the big news came out on Friday. The schedules are released for both the men's and women's programs for Gonzaga's final 36th and final season as members of the West Coast Conference, a conference that has been very good to Gonzaga despite some of the negative narratives that have existed for most of those 36 years around the WCC. It has been a conference that has been fruitful for the Zags, and they are closing it out with what should be a fun slate of games this year. 18-game conference schedule. 11 of those games are set. We know the date. We still don't know the time. We still don't know the TV information, but we at least know the date of 11 of those games. However, for 7 of those games, we do not even know the date. If you saw the schedule reveal, if you saw it posted on social media or any of the places that wrote about it, you saw the number of slashes or the number of ors, February 24th or 25th, February 5th, 6th, or 7th. Like, there's a lot of chaos in this schedule, in part because the WCC is no longer committed to that Thursday-Saturday schedule, which has been the dominant way that these conference games have been scheduled for a very long time, well over a decade in the WCC. It has been Thursday, Saturday with very few exceptions. And this year, the WCC in a press release indicated they're hoping to maintain, quote, date flexibility with national television partners to provide more national exposure for the conference on additional days of the week. A very convoluted way to say we're going to have some games on Thursday or on Wednesdays and on Tuesdays and maybe on Sundays. We're going to have some games on different days because that might help us get more exposure with some of our national media partners. Pretty simple, pretty logical explanation. Probably not thrilled for Gonzaga. There are some situations, we'll get into the actual schedule in a second, that I imagine are quite frustrating for the team, not knowing what actual day or time or anything like that they're going to play. But such is life when TV and national media exposure rules everything, and that is the case with college basketball these days. The schedule starts for Gonzaga, as it has the last couple of years, with a road trip out to Malibu and the Firestone Fieldhouse, where Gonzaga will take on the Waves of Pepperdine on December 28th, followed by a road trip farther south to San Diego on December 30th. Then we get into January, where Gonzaga will not leave the state of Washington, opens up at home against Seattle U on the first conference matchup with that Red Hawks team. Then they got LMU on the 4th at home, and then Santa Clara on the 8th at home. Nice 3-game stretch of home games there to start out the month. Then we get into the Oars. The Zags will take on Washington State in Pullman either January 13th, January 14th, or January 15th, a triple or there. Their next game will be at Seattle U on either January 17th or January 18th. So those two games could be 2 days apart from each other. They could be 5 days apart from each other. And we do not know at this point which of those it will be. After that, Gonzaga takes on Pepperdine on the 20th, 21st, or 22nd, and then they take on San Francisco on the 24th or 25th. Then we get back to the known games. And the Zags know that they will take on St. Mary's in Spokane on January 31st. I doubt this will be the last time Gonzaga hosts St. Mary's, whether that's because St. Mary's eventually joins them in the Pac-12. We'll get to that for a mailbag question later in the show, or if they just schedule each other in a home-and-home series. But it is the last known date where Gonzaga will host St. Mary's at the Kennel, again, January 31st. And then we get into what is, in my mind, the most frustrating road trip. And I will say this with the bias being that I would like to go to both of these games. That is at Portland, the final game in the Chiles Center, February 3rd or 4th or 5th. And then Gonzaga will take on Oregon State in Corvallis, either February 7th or February 8th. This road trip, I have to imagine, is dependent on when those games are significantly for Gonzaga. If they play Portland on February 3rd and they play Oregon State on February 8th, they are likely going to Portland, turning around and coming back to Spokane, and then turning around and going back to Corvallis. But if they play Portland on February 5th and Corvallis on February 7th, they are obviously not going to do two different trips. So right now, that seems like it's up in the air for Gonzaga in terms of how many times they're going to come down to the state of Oregon for those games. Next up, Gonzaga hosting Washington State on the 10th, 11th, or 12th of February. Then they will play Santa Clara in Santa Clara on Valentine's Day, February 14th. Road trip to San Francisco on the 18th. Hosting Pacific on either the 21st or 22nd of February, and then a home game against the Portland Pilots on either the 24th, 25th, or 26th, and then closing it out February 28th, Gonzaga at St. Mary's, the big showdown in Moraga, California, for all of the marbles, potentially. We'll see what the standings look like, of course, but that will be Gonzaga's final regular season game in the WCC, and where better for Gonzaga to play their final game in the conference than at St. Mary's, not only because they have been their longtime rival, but because a rowdy, raucous environment in a very small 3,500 seat, very small high school looking gym is kind of the perfect way to send Gonzaga off to the Pac-12 after their time in the WCC. We talked a little bit about some of the highlights as we went through it, but obviously, without knowing the full scope of their games, we don't know everything that's going to happen for this Gonzaga team. But there are a few other questions, a few other things that I'm wondering about this schedule, notably where a couple of Gonzaga's games will be. Because Gonzaga is playing at San Francisco in February, and they're playing at Seattle U in mid-January. But where those games are remains to be determined. For Gonzaga and San Francisco, the last 2 years, Gonzaga has played them at the Chase Center, the home of the Golden State Warriors, rather than on USF's campus. It has allowed USF to make more money off of this game because they can sell more tickets at the Chase Center, but it has also taken away that home court advantage that San Francisco would have had in this game otherwise. I suspect because there have been tons of renovations to War Memorial, which is where San Francisco plays on their home floor, I suspect this game will be back at War Memorial to show off that arena, but that is not confirmed by anybody, just a speculation on my part. The next one is Gonzaga's game at Seattle U. That game was scheduled for January 17th or 18th, and I do wonder if the schedule of the Climate Pledge Arena plays a role in that game not having a set date, because I would be stunned, capital S stunned, if Gonzaga played Seattle U at the Red Hawk Center, which is Seattle U's current on-campus home that has 1,000 seats. 1,000 seats. Most of you know this, or many of you know this. I am a Seattle U alum. I went to undergrad at Gonzaga, did my graduate degree at Seattle U. I worked there. I worked in their athletic department. I have a lot of close connections there. I am very happy and proud and excited that they're in the WCC. But a 1,000-seat arena will not work going forward for them, and they cannot rely on the Climate Pledge Arena to be their home court for more than a handful of games a year. Having said that, for this year, I think Gonzaga is going to be playing at the Climate Pledge Arena. I would be very surprised if this game ends up at the Red Hawk Center. It doesn't make a lot of sense for either side. It makes some sense for Seattle U to potentially have more of a home court advantage, but I don't know that it matters all that much. And they would probably rather take in the money that they would make from opening up the Climate Pledge Arena than the very limited amount of money they would make with even a packed house at the Red Hawk Center for that game. Those are my main notes. Obviously, we'll have more on this schedule when we find out more in terms of when some of these games are going to happen. But it's nice to be able to look at this schedule and have a good sense of what Gonzaga's final run through the WCC is going to look like. Well, Gonzaga is going to have a 4-star wing in Anthony Felesi on campus for the season opener against Texas Southern on November 3rd. But another 4-star wing, he's not going to be on campus after all. We're going to talk about both those situations coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crash. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste in a tiny little shot, and you can take it anywhere and get that boost whenever you need it. I've been eyeing this new flavor, Purple Berry Punch. It's out right now. Color me intrigued. It sounds like the perfect flavor to try next. Honestly, one of the big things I love about 5-Hour Energy is how fast it kicks in. And again, there's no crash later. So enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from talking about Gonzaga's WCC schedule and the games we know, the games we don't know in their final run through the conference, to instead talk a little recruiting here in the second segment. We have a pair of 4-star wings, comparable in a lot of ways, one who is going to be on campus and one who is not going to be on campus. But a few days ago, that conversation would have flipped as both of them, have changed their minds with regards to visiting Gonzaga. First up, we'll say the good news. Anthony Felesi, 6'5" small forward from Utah Prep in Hurricane, Utah, is set to visit Gonzaga for his official visit on November 3rd. That is when Gonzaga opens up the season against Texas Southern. Always good to get visitors on campus when they can see a game. Always helps to have them here when they're getting to see the crowd and see the kennel and see the routine and everything that goes into being part of the game day experience at Gonzaga. So great for the Zags to be able to snag Felesi, a very well-regarded prospect in the 2026 class. Very good to be able to get him on campus. Again, from Hurricane, Utah, plays at Utah Prep. Last year was teammates with both AJ Dibansa, who is a freshman at BYU, one of the top freshmen in the country, potential top 3 pick in the upcoming NBA draft, as well as JJ Mandikit, who is the starting point guard for that Utah Prep team and is now entering his freshman season at the University of Washington. Felesi was teammates with both of them, and now he enters his senior year, projecting to be more of the guy for this Utah Prep team. 6'5" wing, very versatile player. He's ranked 49th in the updated 247 class rankings, so he's just inside the top 50 in their class rankings. A little lower at On3, they have him 61st. ESPN has him 76th, but still a consensus top 75, top 76 prospect, and a guy that at least 247 has in their top 50. This will be Felesi's 6th official visit, assuming all of them that are scheduled happen. He has already taken 3. He's taken an official visit to USC, an official visit to San Diego State, future Pac-12 rival of Gonzaga. He's also taken an official visit out to Pitt to go see the Panthers and coach Jeff Capel. He has 2 official visits scheduled in October, and Gonzaga will certainly hope that Felesi does not commit to either of these programs and cancels that visit, because they are 2 powerhouses, one of them being Mick Cronin's UCLA Bruins, the other being Pat Kelsey and the Louisville Cardinals, 2 big-time recruiting programs there. That would be visits 4 and 5 for Felesi, with Gonzaga's visit on November 3rd scheduled for his 6th. Now, Felesi also has a handful of other offers out there from high-profile programs, including Villanova and Oregon. LSU, we'll talk about them in a second, has made him an offer, as well as some local programs, Utah, Utah State, UNLV, and then San Francisco as well. Felesi is a physical wing. He's big-bodied. He's strong, good size for his position, good length and mobility. He's a very, very good defensive prospect with really good instincts on that end of the floor. His offense is developing. It's there. We saw glimpses of it. We saw more than glimpses recently on the summer circuit. We can tell that it's kind of starting to come around, but he was more of a defensive prospect with a growing offensive game at this point. And if that sounds familiar, either you've heard me talk about Felesi before, or you've heard me talk about Hurly Brutus before, who is a very similar archetype and is part of the reason, likely, that this change has happened, that Gonzaga is getting Felesi on campus, because Hurly Brutus will no longer arrive on Gonzaga's campus. Brutus was set to be on campus for Craziness in the Kennel October 3rd through 5th, which is a huge recruiting weekend for Gonzaga, and also the weekend that Sam Funches, a 4-star center from Mississippi, is set to be on campus. But now, instead of having 2 4-star recruits on campus, Gonzaga will have just 1. Funches still set to be there, but Hurly Brutus announced on Sunday morning he is committing to the LSU Tigers in the SEC. He chose LSU over a top 6 that included, of course, Gonzaga, as well as Kansas State, Utah, St. Louis, and his hometown team, South Florida. Obviously, you never want to lose a recruit. You never want to lose a recruit before you get them on campus. From everything that I'd been seeing and reading, it sounds like Gonzaga felt pretty confident that Brutus would be able to get a commitment from Brutus if they got him on campus. But there was some concern that this might happen, that he might not end up making it to campus. And that is, of course, the situation we find ourselves in. Brutus is a 6'5" wing. He's from Florida. He plays at the Villages Charter School in Florida. Zags made a big late push for him, but he was not as highly regarded in this class. In fact, 247 Sports, who, like I said, had Felesi 49th, they have Hurly Brutus 141st. The most updated rankings from the premier recruiting service in college basketball basically believes there's 90 players in this class between Anthony Felesi and Hurly Brutus. Take what you will. Obviously, we are now more focused on Felesi, knowing that he's coming to campus, and Brutus, who is not going to be on campus. But this is a player that Gonzaga really did make a strong and late push for. So this is a disappointment, and it comes on the heels of Gonzaga also not landing Ethan Harris, another prospect they made a pretty aggressive late push for, from Camas Washington, a local kid. He chose Iowa over Gonzaga, Washington, and Boise State. I am not concerned about Gonzaga missing on both Brutus and Harris. I'm not that concerned, I should say. Would it have been nice to get at least one of them? Sure. Brutus is a guy I really liked. I liked his physicality. I liked his tenacity on defense. I hadn't seen the offensive profile pop all that much, but there was reports that he was really starting to develop on that side of the ball, and I think he would have been a strong fit for Gonzaga. But I would also caution, because it's easy to look at the headline here and to see a player who's not a top 100 recruit. On3 has him 89th, ESPN has him 82nd. So even if you use those services, he's not a top 75 recruit. It'd be easy to see a player at that level who's choosing not to come to Gonzaga. And again, when you lump it in with Ethan Harris, who was outside the top 100 at most media outlets, who also didn't come to Gonzaga, I think it'd be easy to see those two things and start to panic. And I would caution not to do that. If 2 months from now, Gonzaga has 0 commitments in the 2026 class, if they swing and miss on Felesi, on Luka Foster, on Cameron Holmes, on Sam Funches, on anybody else in this class that ends up popping onto that list, Luka Foster, then yes, then we will be panicking. We will be concerned about Gonzaga's recruiting at that point. But I'm not concerned yet. And I don't think that the fact that these players aren't super highly regarded and are not choosing Gonzaga is cause for concern. Like, I think if Gonzaga misses out on Tyran Stokes or a top 5 players in this class, you kind of think, oh, well, those guys are hard to get, Kentucky, Louisville, et cetera, whatever. Whereas losing a player to LSU or Iowa, who aren't top 100 prospects, can feel worse. I think it's more of Gonzaga knowing what they want and knowing how they value certain players and not over-promising. Gonzaga did not promise an exorbitant amount of money to Hurly Brutus or Ethan Harris. That is my speculation on this situation. They also did not promise day one playing time. They promised development. They promised, what the system has been able to do. And when players then get the opportunity to, get promised, hey, you play right away. You'll be a day one starter for us, or you'll be a contributor right away, or we can get you more money, or, so-and-so things. You start to see a change of heart. And so I think for Gonzaga, like, Mark Few and the staff are very good at sticking to their guns and saying, this is what we're willing to do. And we like this player and we think we can get him, and we think we can get him at this price point and with these kinds of guarantees or this kind of promise. And those players may change their mind and may decide that, hey, I didn't think that being close to home was important to me, but now I've changed my mind. Or I didn't think playing time right away was important to me, but I've changed my mind. We're talking about 17-year-olds. Guess what? They changed their minds. This is a thing that happens. And for Gonzaga, I think the fact that they are willing to stick to their guns and not concede just in order to, appease the fan base and land a player in the class because they know people are getting frustrated about it. That's not who Mark Few and this staff is. Again, we'll revisit this conversation. If Gonzaga's 1 for 6 out of the prospects they're going after in the 2026 class, there's going to be some cause for concern there. But if they get a couple guys, if they get some guys they really wanted, and it just happens a little later in the cycle, then I don't think that we're going to have to be overly concerned about this. Again, as a reminder, Gonzaga will have Sam Funches on campus for Craziness in the Kennel October 4th. They will have Luca Foster, a top 30 recruit and a high-level scorer, on campus on October 11th. Anthony Felesi, who we started this conversation about, will be on campus November 3rd. And then Cameron Holmes, consensus 5-star wing, younger brother of All-American Dayron Holmes. Cameron will be on campus November 8th for Gonzaga's game against Oklahoma. Well, we're going to continue the conversation about recruiting going into the third and final segment because, as I mentioned, Tyran Stokes earlier, he has been on Gonzaga's radar, the number 1 recruit in the 2026 class, but he is playing football this year at Notre Dame High School in California. Could that impact Gonzaga's pursuit of the number 1 recruit? We'll talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for businesses is Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system that you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call, folks, that's money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. And Quo is the number 1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer. So no more carrying 2 phones around or needing to rely on a landline. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hour calls, capture leads, and keep businesses moving even when you're off the clock. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started free and 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Folks, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. One of the great things about FanDuel is that it fits however you like to bet, whether that's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to get a little bit more energy on your Sundays. Talking future odds for Gonzaga, plus 3,500 for Mark Few's team to take home their first national championship in 2026. Folks, if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. All right, folks, closing out the show, we got a pair of questions here for Mailbag Monday. I haven't done a mailbag in a while, but had a few come through and thought this would be a good opportunity to answer them. One of them remains on the topic of recruiting, so we will go there first. This first question here comes from Pilot Cam on Instagram, who says, the number 1 recruit in the country, Tyran Stokes, is playing football at Notre Dame High School this year. Does Gonzaga not having a football team take them out of the running, or is it even relevant for them in this recruiting battle? So, no. It's kind of the answer to both. Does Gonzaga not having a football team take them out of the running? No. Tyran Stokes is not going to play football at the Division I level. He is a top-tier basketball prospect. He is a candidate to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2027 NBA draft. He is a 6'7", 245-pound wrecking ball of an athlete who I am not surprised excels on the football field or could play college football or at least high-level high school football. He is built like a football player. He is a tank, but he's not going to play football at the next level. None of the teams that are pursuing him, that are football schools, which is everybody except Gonzaga at this point. That would be Louisville, Kentucky, and Oregon and Arkansas, excuse me. So yeah, Pat Kelsey, Mark Pope, Dana Altman, John Calipari, they're not letting him play football, especially sports that overlap in season the way that football and basketball do. There's just no way that it's happening. Is it even relevant to Gonzaga in the recruiting battle? Also, no, because Gonzaga is pretty far out of the conversation right now for Tyran Stokes. They are still in the conversation. According to a recent conversation that was had by Travis Branham of 247 Sports, talking with Tyran Stokes, talking about his recruitment, all accounts indicate that Gonzaga is still vaguely in the running and has continued to have conversations trying to get Tyran on to campus. But no visit has been set, according to this recent report, between Tyran Stokes and Gonzaga. If they do not get him on campus, he is not going to come to Gonzaga. There's just zero chance. If they do get him on campus, the odds of him committing to Gonzaga go up very slightly. But I think that ultimately this is going to come down to Kentucky or Arkansas or Louisville. With apologies to Oregon, they got big old Phil Knight Nike money. Dana Altman is a quality recruiter, but I would be very surprised if it ends up being Oregon. I would be even more surprised if it ends up being Gonzaga. Tyran Stokes is very likely going to end up at Kentucky, Louisville, or Arkansas. All places that recruit at an extremely high level, all places that make a lot of sense for his capabilities and talent level. Would he be great at Gonzaga? Of course. Of course he would be great at Gonzaga. He could play just about anywhere because he's a very, very talented player. And I think in a high-octane offense that relies on getting out in transition and scoring at the rim, he would be an absolute menace. And I think the staff has convinced him of that, and that is the reason that they are still in the picture at this point. It helps that he went to high school where Dusty Stromer went to high school and that Gonzaga likely saw him early in his high school career. But at this point, he's ascended to a point where he is being pursued by the bluest of blue bloods, and Gonzaga is going to have a hard time prying him away. The football part of the conversation, largely irrelevant. Does Gonzaga not having football hurt them recruiting overall? That's maybe a conversation for a different time. Ultimately, yes, it has, I am certain, hurt them at times. Players who just want to go to a football school, who want to go play for a conference that has football and want to be able to go to games and things like that. I'm sure that that has happened. But ultimately, in the future, it may be an advantage for Gonzaga to not have football, as we have talked about extensively through the NIL and the House settlement, and Gonzaga now having potentially, with the Pac-12 media deal coming together, a lot more money to spend on their basketball program than other teams in the conference and potentially other teams nationally as well. Final question of the show comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, a couple of weeks ago, St. Mary's announced an exploratory committee looking into expanding their basketball gym from 3,500 to 5,000 seats. Would having the expanded gym announced be enough, or would St. Mary's need to actually expand the basketball gym to 5,000 before the Pac-12 adds St. Mary's? Announced would be fine. Announced would be fine. The idea of the Pac-12 waiting to invite St. Mary's until they finish, like I'm just picturing Teresa Gould, the Pac-12 commissioner, like just waiting and watching for them to put the final seats together in the gym in Moraga. And once it's done and all sparkly and shiny, then they make the offer. I know that's not what you're suggesting, Jeff, but it's a funny image because that's not how this is going to work. I do think these things, there's some synergy here. And if that's the point of the question, then yes, I very much agree. This has been kind of known and talked about for a while, specific reporting from John Canzano, a Pac-12 insider, who's kind of said that there is a waiting game right now. The Pac-12 is finalizing other things, but when they start looking to add more affiliate members or non-football members, that St. Mary's will be somebody that they'll contact and potentially extend an invite to. It's not confirmed that they'll do that, but those conversations are expected to happen. And part of it is the lack of resources for St. Mary's and the size of their facilities. A 3,500 seat arena is not big enough for the Pac-12 to feel confident about inviting St. Mary's. It is possible they would invite them without it, but I think it would be with the caveat that they are planning to build it. I think that ultimately St. Mary's making an announcement that they are making renovations. They are expanding. They do have a timeline for when they want their arena to be done. That would be enough for the Pac-12 to invite them. I think that there again would be some contingencies. Like the Pac-12 would extend the invite saying like this, your project needs to get done. So St. Mary's can't just bail out of doing the project after the Pac-12 sends them an invite. Like there's going to be laws and contracts and things written up, legalese that are going to make sure that that happens. But I don't think that they're going to wait for it to be done. There's not really any benefit for the Pac-12 in doing so, because again, I think the Pac-12 would just send them an invite and say, hey, you'll join starting in 2027, 28 with the expectation that your arena's done by then, or at least very close to being done by then. That's, again, some of that's speculation. Some of that's just some reporting from John Canzano. But I do think that St. Mary's would make the decision to expand their arena even without a firm invite from the Pac-12, in part because maybe they'll get a firm invite from the Mountain West, or maybe they just want to build a bigger arena, have more seats, more ticket revenue, use that money to spend on their basketball team. Like there's plenty of reasons that building would make a lot of sense for them right now that are not related to the Pac-12. But I do think that these things are probably connected, and we'll be keeping a close eye on the Pac-12's movement over the next couple of months. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. This will be the final episode of September. We're going to take Tuesday off, and then Wednesday we start our player preview series. Got a show lined up for you all on Wednesday talking about Ismaila Diani. Oh, it's going to be so much fun to get into those player previews. And then, of course, later in the week, we will get you ready for craziness in the kennel. Cannot believe we are less than a week away from the official start of the Gonzaga basketball season. Thank you so much, folks. Again, we'll be back with some more fun shows later this week. But as always, have a fantastic rest of your day, and go Zags.